Greetings and welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast. Today's topic is automotive photography, and joining us via Skype from his Los Angeles studio is Nate Hassler, a Los Angeles-based photographer and director who happens to specialize in shooting stills and video of cars for magazines and advertising. His clients include Toyota, Honda, Lexus, and Mercedes. Welcome to our show.
Good morning, guys. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure having you. So I'm going to start right into it. When did you start photographing cars, and specifically, how did you weasel your way into the first car assignment? Were you qualified, or did you fake it? I mean, how'd you do this?
Well, I did fake it at first.
We all did.
I started off shooting at my dad's photo studio in Portland, Oregon, actually. He was doing a lot of product photography, so I worked there in my early 20s. And I began to shoot cars because I liked cars, and I had a modified Honda that I wanted to take pictures of to put online. It was in that weird time before social media was really out, but I didn't have the opportunity to have stuff published right away. I just shot for message forums, basically. And I eventually got a job at a tuner car magazine called Modified, which is now gone, unfortunately. But that was my first real publishing, was once I had a staff job already. So that was kind of crazy.
And that seems like a great first step, obviously.
It was a small magazine, a staff of only about 5 people total.
Right.
So I had a great boss. He and I got along fantastically, and he let me do whatever I wanted within their budget, which was next to nothing. So basically, I would shoot and retouch and have to learn how to light stuff pretty much all on my own, because we didn't have really the facilities to do it in a more traditional way. It was really learn by doing. Mm-hmm. And we had a studio on site, which was really helpful. So I got a lot of free time to basically just practice in a giant car studio, which is something not a lot of people get. So
that's something I want to ask about.
Yeah,
we'll get to that. I guess,
we'll park that one down a little bit over there. Yeah.
Can I just ask real quick though? Your dad was a professional photographer as you grew up, and did you? Mm-hmm. Were you in the studio a lot with him, or is it something that you didn't really care about until you were a little older?
No, I was a lot. Pretty much as soon as I was old enough to do something that was helpful instead of make his life harder, right. I would be at his studio 24? In the summer. Teenage years. I would run to get coffee and get lunch. Mm-hmm. And I would shoot film in high school. I did photo class all 4 years of high school. They let me do way more than most kids for whatever reasons. Mm-hmm. But my dad and my mom worked together running their studio for a long time. And when they retired is when I decided to move from Portland to LA and to pursue my passion of shooting cars instead of shooting product. Because I just thought at that point, well, I should do something that I like instead of something that I think is safe, which is a hard decision. But I was 24, so I didn't have a lot to lose either.
Absolutely.
By the way, you say the word safe, and there's a lot of things about shooting cars that are not safe. Again, it depends how you mount your camera, whether you're holding it or whether it's mounted. But there is a lot of things about shooting cars that's different from other photographic endeavors. Could you talk about some of these things, the challenges of photographing cars, aside from the fact that they're big?
and moving.
Yeah.
Yes. Sometimes. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. There's kind of, if you shoot racing or motorsports, that is not entirely unlike shooting other types of sports in the sense that your subject is constantly moving and it's unpredictable and you can't repeat what just happened. And then there's the other big part of shooting cars where it is a controlled environment. And a lot of times you're on tripod and you're lighting the car in little pieces here and there, and you're waiting for the perfect sunset or whatever. That part of it is kind of like landscape and product photography morphed together, because the car is giant and it has at least 5 or 6 different textures on it: glass, paint, rubber, plastic. And they all light a little differently, and they all kind of react differently to different types of, strobe lighting or however you decide to do it. So yeah, it's kind of like a giant mirror.
And when you're photographing a car or anything similar to that, it's an interesting problem that you have, because you're not only lighting the car itself, but and photographing the car, but you're also lighting and capturing everything that is being reflected from all of the surfaces on the car. So it's got a lot of unique challenges to it. You literally have to sculpt the shape of the car based on what is being reflected and what's not being reflected.
Yeah, the reflections and strategically using positive reflections and killing the ones that look bad. That's a huge part of the battle, because you don't want to have no reflections all the time, because that kind of looks like it's pasted in. Mm-hmm. But, it's all subjective too. Everyone has their own approach to shooting a car and their own idea of what they think looks good. And also, the client or art directors will dictate that a lot of times as well.
Yeah.
So,
and most of that, is that an in-camera decision usually when you're talking about worrying about those reflections that you don't want, or do you tend to take care of that in the post process?
I personally prefer to try to deal with it on set if we can.
Right.
Sometimes you can't. And other times it's just a little math problem of how long is it going to take to kill this in camera versus in retouching.
Gotcha.
And sometimes, the reality is sometimes it's just way faster to retouch it out than it is to build a whole wall or cover a whole building in Duvetine or something.
Right. And if this is, let's say, a big job with an advertising firm and the client, are they all going to be with you more or less on location or on set talking this over? Or are you, once the job is kind of had and you're doing it, are you the only decision maker on set?
It varies, but typically there will be an art director and a creative director, or maybe just one of the two, depending on the scope and where it is. Sometimes there will be 20 or 25 people with us, but usually it's not that many. There's usually one or two people from the client, sometimes more. And occasionally we'll have retouchers on set. Mm-hmm. But typically when I'm shooting on location or in studio, I'll have a digitech and 2 grip assistants. And then whoever from agency and client is there, that could be 2 to 10 people. It just depends, because everyone kind of has their own precedence of how they like to do that.
Somebody has to claim responsibility.
Yeah.
Somebody has to sign off on it, because otherwise it's all yours. What about a gear? I mean, as my reference point, when I was actively shooting, I did a lot of boats and yachts and stuff. And I once had a project where we basically did a boat catalog in the factory itself. We were photographing boats from 17 to 38 feet. And we built Sykes out of white seamless that were on wheels that we could move in and out. But the biggest thing we had to do was to light the boat itself. I rented from Chimera. They had a 10 by 30 foot light box that came with its own assistant, because you didn't do this by yourself. And we loaded it up with about 30 different heads and about, I don't remember how many watt seconds of light in that thing. Do you have anything of that sort, any kind of tools that are very unique to this sort of large product photography?
Yeah, so I don't own large lighting like that. I rent that sort of stuff because the price to purchase that sort of thing
I don't even think
fairly crazy.
Chimera doesn't even sell them. They had at the time like 10 of them, and they only rented them.
Yeah, there's some studios that specialize in cars and boats and like small aircraft, and they have similar sort of deals. They have the giant light banks, or the thing that I actually like to use is a giant like 40 by 50 foot canvas covered flat. So it's just kind of like a huge piece of foam core if you think about that. Mm-hmm. And that floats above the car, and you can adjust it in any way you want. And the reason I actually prefer that over the light bank is because you can point a strobe at it and use barn doors or some cinefoil or whatever you want to make a certain shape on the flat, which will then in turn reflect on the car. Whereas the light box is a solid.
It's a wall of light.
Yeah,
it's a giant
exactly.
wall of light. That's what it is. Yep.
Yeah. And that's great. Also, it's definitely faster. So sometimes when you have to shoot a ton of stuff in a short amount of time, the light box is definitely easier. But using a Psych Studio with a big canvas flat, I kind of prefer that because I'm just used to it. Also, you get your own methods and figure out what works for you. And after a while, it's just kind of like clockwork, and it doesn't take too long to figure it out. But at first, it was definitely a bit of a learning curve.
So there are studios that are specifically designed for cars and other giant objects like this. And are they commonplace in LA? I mean, and is LA kind of the focal spot for this type of work, or will you find it in other locations?
Yeah, in LA, there's probably 5 or 10 really well known, and I'm sure there are other smaller places that are not as known.
Yeah, but you've got weather and you've got varied scenery. Like you go 2 hours in any direction, you can get any kind of backdrop and scenery and roads that you want. That's another advantage of being where you are.
Yeah, that's a huge part of why there's a lot of car photography in LA. It's the close proximity to mountains, beach, desert, and a city. Those 4 basic looks are really good for cars.
Right.
And the studio, I prefer to be on location. The studio is a totally different beast than location, but there happen to be a bunch of car studios here because a lot of the main agencies that handle car accounts are here. They're usually either here or in Detroit, and there's a handful in New York and a couple kind of spread out in other cities. But for the most part, it's LA and Detroit.
Do you have to be comfortable working in studio and on location, or are there photographers that are known just for one or the other?
Yeah, that's what I was just going to ask. Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely photographers who are more focused on one or the other. I know a couple of people who don't ever shoot in studio just because it takes a lot of time to learn how to do that. Yeah, and that's fine. There's plenty of work to go around. So I don't think anyone needs to try to do everything. It's hard to be good at something if you do everything. Right. But.
Let me ask you a quick question. We were talking about people on set. Will the car? I'm assuming there are like car handlers. Like there's a team of people that actually bring the car, make sure it's in its best shape, and are they a serious presence on every set and every location, or they just kind of drop the car and then have a cup of coffee?
I would imagine you have a dedicated driver with each of your cars. No.
Yep, there are car prep companies, and again, there are numerous car prep companies around the country, but there is a few here in LA that do a lot of traveling and delivering of cars, and the car prep team will bring the vehicle to set. They'll unload it from the trailer, clean it all off, make sure it's working. Sometimes the cars are like early production models and not everything functions. So, and occasionally you have to take off doors or windows to get a certain angle, stuff like for interior shots. So the car prep guys do all of that. And then if you have stunt drivers versus if you're not doing action shots, a lot of times the car prep will just park the car where it needs to be. But if you're doing like running footage, there's usually a specific driver. But again, about half the car prep guys are also precision drivers. So it's just kind of a case by case basis on that one.
Question I have about shooting cars that are underway. Do you usually handhold your cameras, or are you using bracket, well stabilized brackets? What's your ratio of handheld to mounted cameras?
For like rolling shots?
Yeah, for running shots of cars. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, about half and half. You can shoot from a camera car, or you can try to rig. And if you rig, usually that's a whole process that takes a lot longer, but you get a different result. And it opens up some possibilities that you can't really get by shooting handheld from a camera car.
Oh, sure. You can do anything handheld. It's just that you might get yourself killed.
Yeah. I usually use a harness, just like a construction worker harness, and then you attach it to a one of those loops that holds the seat belts in the car. So you can kind of lean out and you're held securely that way.
What about image stabilization? Cameras today have, most cameras have built-in stabilization. I know back when I was shooting boats, it was film, and I used to just attach stabilizers to the bottom of the camera, these big monster units.
Yeah.
Do you still have to rely on those, or is in-camera stabilization to a point where you could actually get away with this?
Typically, the in-camera stabilization is going to be good up until about 1/30th of a second or so. And if you decide that you want to try to drag the shutter longer than that, you can use a one of those kind of blimp-shaped stabilizers that you attach to the camera. Some people, I think, will shoot with something more like a Ronin, but I think that would be hard to control for stills, because I like to be able to look and actually quickly adjust the angle instead of having to do it with controls like on a joystick. But I usually just do it handheld for car to car. And with a rig where it's like an arm coming out from either the underside of the car or from the top with suction cups, those are all, you just do brackets and you turn the polarizer and you can light the car. And that's basically the same as if you were just shooting a static, except there's an extra step of moving the car at the end. So the rig shot is a beast kind of all of its own, but car to car shooting is, a lot of people are doing that because it's quick and it has a real natural look. I think there's a push lately towards realism, and not so much the ultra highly lit, like overdone sort of look. Which is,
you're mostly talking about advertising at this point, right? This is referring to advertising, I guess, right?
Yeah. Editorial car shooting is definitely more open to whatever you want, typically. Yeah. But with advertising, the look is going to be dictated typically by the art directors and the creative directors.
Yeah, they already had 15 layers of people who approved the layout, and they're not going to just say, go take a picture and we'll make it work. That doesn't happen.
Yeah, usually not. Sometimes there'll be pickup shots and stuff like that. But the major art, there's always a schedule and a angle that's fairly predetermined. Mm-hmm. And again, some agencies and some clients are extremely strict and others are a little bit more open to interpretation. You really just kind of have to read who you're working with and see what they like, and just adapt on the fly.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That actually answered the question I had. I wanted to kind of get a sense of how much input you're going to give either on location or prior in the meetings to say, I think we should do this and that, but I guess it goes job to job.
Yeah, it totally varies. Yeah, sometimes people want to hire you for your eye, and other times they may look at all your work and say, wow, this is fantastic. And then here's like a strict guideline of what to shoot. And that's fine. That's how different strokes for different folks. Sure. Just gotta being able to adapt to that, I think, is a big part of, you have to be your own public relations agent at all times. And you have to always smile and do your best to make sure that the client and the agency is happy, even if you might not necessarily like every single piece of art direction that you're given.
And you work through an agency or a representative. Do your jobs mostly come through the one agency goes to your agent and asks for you, or then they suggest you, or do you often make the deals yourself?
I have a rep that I work with, and I would say it's about half and half. I have some house accounts, and my rep also provides a good amount of work, and we have a good relationship. Finding a good rep is really not as simple as it sounds, and not everyone has a good relationship with their rep. And again, every rep kind of
marriage. It's a marriage. No, seriously, I don't say that joke. It is a marriage.
Yeah, and it's always a learning process. We've edited my portfolio heavily and changed a lot, and we'll do it again in an attempt to see, well, this worked here, but it didn't work there. So let's try to appeal to this sort of vibe for this person. Or it's a real complex beast. But having a rep that you get along with and having a rep who understands what your goals are, that is the big important part. And making sure that they're communicating and that you guys together are happy and neither party feels like it's not working, because it's not always peaches and cream with reps, but I'm fortunate to have a great rep, and we are doing a really good job together.
Do you have a set portfolio for car when you go out on trying to a client, a potential client, and when you put together a portfolio? Do you have variations of a portfolios for cars? I mean, obviously, if they have a specific shot that they say we want to do a shot on a curving road in a desert, obviously you're going to give them 20 pictures of cars on curving roads in deserts. But if you're just being called in for we have an automotive client, we want to see what you do. Is there a set book that just gives a balance of what you're doing indoors, outdoors, and details?
Yeah, I do have a portfolio that I change every couple of months. I might change out a few images here and there or add new projects, but generally it stays the same and just slowly adapts over time. And like you said, if there's a specific bid that I'm doing, I have a whole bank of other images that I can make a PDF, like a treatment with various other stuff. But yeah, when I go to meetings, or when my rep goes to meetings, if I can't go, I have the same portfolio for each one. I don't have a separate studio or location book. I just prefer personally to have it all in one book. Mm-hmm. But again, that's kind of a subjective thing.
And when you say book, do you still have a book, or is it?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I do. And we also show video on iPad. Mm-hmm. And if there's brand new stuff that hasn't had the chance to be printed yet, I can show that on an iPad. Gotcha. A lot of people really like to be able to touch paper. Mm-hmm.
I've been reading that hard print portfolios still have a tremendous value.
Yeah,
I've heard that a few times lately.
Yeah, cool.
I think they really do. And it's a little cumbersome and all that, but it's the price of doing business.
They also make you stop and slow down. You could flip through an iPad or a phone very quickly. When you're holding a portfolio in front of you, you pause more, you look more, and I think you ask more questions.
Yeah, and the value of a tactile, like high quality paper, people like that. And then you just kind of get into talking with the people about other stuff. And most of these people that you're trying to work with are going to typically have good taste in things in general. So if you present a nice book with good paper, they'll notice that right away.
And that also says something about your brand.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same reason why you want to dress nice. You don't need to wear a suit, but don't look like a total burnout either. Maybe find a happy medium.
Yeah.
That phrase since I was in junior high.
We hope you're enjoying this edition of the B&H Photography Podcast. Send us a tweet at BHPhotoVideo, #BHPhotoPodcast.
We were talking a little bit earlier about gear, and we didn't ask you your cameras, and if you can tell us what you use, and do you vary it based on location or studio and or the type of job you're doing?
Yeah. There are definitely different tools for different uses. My typical go-to camera that I love at the moment is the Nikon D850. It's great for studio, and actually it's also really good for shooting racing. It's got a really good high burst rate and a really good AF system. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times we'll end up using a Phase or a Hasselblad for when you need really high resolution. Right. But the flip side of those cameras...
Even on a location job you would?
Yeah, sure. It's just based on how big the files need to be in the end. Mm-hmm. And again, that will be dictated by each client and each agency. Some people say 45 megapixels is enough. Other people want 100.
Right.
And but those...
Are the agents and the people you're dealing with, the creatives, kind of savvy about that? They're going to say, we need this, or because often I find with some of the clients I have, it's not the same business, of course, but they couldn't tell the difference if they tried.
All the agency people have protocols, and they are very knowledgeable about how big the files need to be and what their particular requirements are. Mm-hmm. Sometimes with editorial, it's different. And sometimes if you're shooting for social media only, or if you're doing a project where it's run and gun sort of style, they know that the price of a medium format camera is not going to work. So, and again, it's unless you're shooting something really large format, a lot of time you don't really need that much data.
Right.
So,
and do you charge? Do you include like a rental fee when you charge? Let's say, do you rent? Let's say the medium format. If you go to Hasselblad or Phase, or is that something you own already? And if so, do you then adjust the fee accordingly, like some photographers do?
Yeah, no, I don't own a medium format digital system. I have a RZ67 that I shoot film on for fun and for portfolio. But whenever I rent for jobs, I always bill the rental.
Yeah.
And even with my owned equipment, I usually bill a rental fee for that. But again, that just depends. Sometimes you can get a decent budget, and other times you have to be real tight and make a decision of like, how badly do I want to do this job versus how much am I going to take home?
Gotcha.
What about focal ranges, focal lengths? What do you stick to from, assuming you're not doing a shot that say we want to have a car coming at us, from a quarter of a mile away and you're shooting with a real long telephoto lens for crushing. But if you're just doing, side by side, you're pacing with it or whatever, what focal lengths do you stick to?
I mean, honestly, I'm using the 24-70 2.8 as my main workhorse lens, but I'll use primes when it's not like a time sensitive issue. But if you're doing action shots, a zoom is really, really great. That lens is nice, and yeah, you can nitpick about certain qualities around the edges and stuff like that. But my kit is a 24-70, a 70-200. And then I have a 35, a 50, a 58, like VFX lens, and an 85. And that pretty much covers it. I've never really felt that I need a longer lens than 200, aside from motorsports, which is the one time where sometimes it's really cool to have a 400 for, some like that sort of stuff. I shoot motorsports because I love cars and I love racing, but that's not a big source of income for me. That's more like the fun part.
Do you have any side projects that are personal that regarding cars? I guess that's totally what it is. Yeah.
Well, I love cars, and I have a couple of project cars, but like photographing, like photography wise, I shoot a lot of Fuji Instax film.
Oh, funny.
And I have a camera that's actually it's called a Franken Instax. It's a Schneider 65 5.6 lens attached to a Fuji camera. And it has a focusing boss that basically it just turns the camera into a film back, and you can have full adjustability of your focus and your exposure through the lens. And it looks hilarious. Everywhere I go with it, people are like, what is that?
That's like putting a V12 into an old VW.
Yeah.
I love it.
I can get shutter drag if I want to pan. Like I shot a whole motorsports event with that camera, and I ended up getting a pretty cool 2-page spread in the Porsche Club magazine from it, which was great. Those guys are awesome. And I was super happy that they saw some interesting potential in my little Instax film, because it's definitely not the typical like clean digital files.
Do you ever play around with wider angle lenses, because that is it's tricky and dangerous. It could work, but it could also screw you up thoroughly. Do you ever play around with ultra wides when shooting cars? And the reason why I ask is that the very first boat I ever shot, I was really feeling creative, and I shot all the exteriors with a 20 millimeter lens and a Nikon. And the art director looked at the transparencies. These shots are amazing. He says, now get on the phone and call a guy and make another appointment and take pictures tomorrow with a real lens that I could see what the boat looks like. He says, I didn't ask you to interpret it. I asked you to photograph it. And it was a very valid point. It was a great lesson that I learned. Do you have that same kind of thing? Because again, you can get some really wonderful angles with wide angle lens with cars and things of that sort. But if you tilt that lens the wrong way, it just turns bozo. It's a very fine line.
The distortion of the product, right? That's the thing that I hear. And you're right. I typically don't shoot wide for commercial type of stuff unless they really want it, because the design of the car will be affected drastically by a wide lens. Your wheels that are supposed to be round will start to look like eggs in the corner. Yeah. And the
headlights start jumping out at you and all kinds of fun stuff. Yes.
Yeah. The only time I use I have a 14 to 24 that I use for interior shots.
Yes.
Because the interiors of cars are very cramped typically. And again, that's kind of, you shoot wide and use lens correction and like keystone corrections to fix all of the little.
Your only alternative is to take the car apart and shoot with a longer lens from a distance, and that's not always feasible. You can't take them apart too easily. Yes.
Sometimes that, they'll have cars that they'll call a buck or a bucket where they can literally cut the roof apart and take the car apart. But to be honest, that's not that common. It's usually more just like, here's a car. And then they'll say, well, here's a rendering of what we want. And then sometimes my job includes saying, well, do you have a Sawzall? Because if you don't, we're going to have to change this angle a little bit.
So are you the director on the set when you have these kind of high-end vehicles and you have a creative on site and you also have people who know the cars and handle them? Or are you often just saying, okay, get it ready the way you want it and then I'll take the pics? Or
I'm very hands-on and not everyone is like that. Some photographers who have been doing this for 30, 40 years, just to put it in perspective, I was born in 1985. So I have not had part of that super high budget early 2000s, late 90s sort of stuff. We live in a different world now, and I can't afford to be a diva. So I am hands-on. I decide how I want to light things, but I work with whoever is the creative, obviously, because it's they have their vision and I have mine, and we work together to figure it out.
And you want them to hire you again?
Yeah, and I don't ever just like throw my camera to an assistant and say, go make it look good, and I'm going to cash the check later. Like, that's not how I roll.
No. I didn't mean it in terms of that, the sense of like, diva necessarily. Well, although I do take your point, but it had to be more with the idea that like who makes that final decision on set,
Yeah, that the final decision is usually collaborative between the photographer and the creatives.
Right.
And again, some creatives are more strict with their ideas, and some are more interested in seeing how you see it. Yeah. And again, it's usually you kind of go back and forth and you find something that works in the end. And
do you find yourself working with the same creatives again over and over, or not really? The industry bounces you around a lot.
There's a lot of people who move between agencies. It's pretty common that someone will work for a couple years or maybe just a month or two and then move somewhere else. But I find myself talking to and working with a lot of the same people. Just sometimes it's at a different place.
Do you have weather conditions that you prefer, lighting conditions? I know sunrise and sunset, or rather the time leading up to sunrise and the 40 minutes after sunset are considered optimum because you get those incredible tones and gradations and color and stuff. But do you have any particular lighting conditions that you go, yes, this is what I want, this is what I like?
Yeah, totally. I love the hours leading up to sunset when the sun's still up, because I like backlit photos. And one of the things about metallic paint on car is that a backlit angle typically looks really awesome.
Yeah.
And when you're lighting from the same side as the camera, it doesn't always look as great. It sometimes can flatten out a lot. So having the sun go down in the background, not always in your shot, but just kind of like 90 degrees bouncing off the car into your lens, that sort of general light typically looks great. So I love it from 3 o'clock up until 7 at this time of year when the sun's going down. It's just great.
I have a question. I did want to jump back quickly when you were talking about the lenses. You shoot Nikon lenses, correct? Because you generally with your D850? Okay.
Yeah, we also have a Sigma Art 35 and 85.
Okay.
And then I have this funky 58 millimeter Petzval lens.
Oh, yeah.
And I bought that as kind of like a way to explore something funky.
Right.
And I really love it. It's super bizarre, but that's exactly what I wanted.
Cool. So getting back to the point about the backlight and the time of day, have you found that you've kind of incorporated styles from other photo genres into this work? I guess landscaping, an obvious example. And
yeah, absolutely. I do. I take a lot of inspiration from landscape photography, and I guess to a lesser extent from fashion.
Mm-hmm.
I really like to see people do things that are weird and kind of crazy, and to take a technique that sounds kind of bad, but to make something interesting out of it. I like that a lot. But landscape photography is where I really look at stuff for a long time. Like I find myself staring at beautiful landscapes and thinking, man, I need to go do some more of this.
And is there room for, like focus stacking and other techniques that you're seeing more in landscape work now in this kind of work, or you need to be pretty much straight up?
Yeah, no, you can. For example, with focus stacking, when you're shooting a car, a lot of times what you'll do is you'll do exposure brackets, and you will turn a circular polarizer to a number of different positions and do brackets for all of that. And then if you're lighting it with strobes or constant lights, you also kind of need to keep the focus in the same place for all that, because otherwise your image is going to shift around a little bit. So I don't mess with focus stacking, but I have there's a lot of different ways you can do the retouching for a car shot, but the shooting process is fairly similar each time, just from like a execution standpoint.
What about one of those shots that, where the car's blasting by you and it's stuck in the frame, frozen, and the background is moving, which seems to be pretty common. How tough is that to get that, and how many takes will you do? I'm sure it's different every time, but
you need a good stabilizer unit is what it is.
Yeah,
but I know for boats you could handhold for a second and get a sharp boat when you're blasting along at high rates of speed.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for example, when they're shooting racing, like panning is what you're talking about, right?
Right. I
mean,
or pacing with the vehicle. There's two ways of doing it.
Yeah. I mean, how much of that is just kind of, your physical skill and your experience, and how much is it, luck and lighting and everything working out?
If you're doing a tracking shot, like if you're sitting in a camera car and you're shooting a car behind you, that's more like a numbers game, because you're bouncing around and shaking.
Yeah.
So not every shot's going to be sharp. That's just
and you're shooting on continuous, right? You're blasting it out.
Yeah, I usually shoot burst, and I'll kind of wait for the right moments and shoot like 5 or 10 shots, and then wait and then shoot 5 or 10. But if you're standing and shooting a car that's going by you, but you're standing still, that panning is just like practice. That takes time to just get steady. And again, it's also subjective, because you might want a bunch of really crazy blur, or someone else might want like a really tight shot where it, is sharp front to back. But I kind of like more like weird blurry stuff. I don't know where that comes from, but like when I shoot racing, that's a big part of it, I think, is being trackside with 100, 200, 300 other photographers, thinking like, okay, what are all these guys doing? And if you see like 40 guys who have a 70 to 200 pointed at the same place, doing the same pan every time, maybe you should go 20 feet to the left and use
something else, sure.
wide, and see if you can do something different.
Yeah. And can we talk a little bit about post-processing? And I guess I'm thinking more about advertising now. Do you do it yourself and then submit, your final cut, and then they'll work on it themselves, or do you just pass it right on? How's that work? And what are some of the techniques that you tend to use?
I do a lot of my own retouching, but most of the time for commercial jobs, the retouching is given to a retouching house. Right. For editorial and like PR stuff, I usually do it myself. And again, I learned my own retouching at the beginning of my career because I had to. I had no ability to pass it on to someone else. So if I wanted it to look cool, I had to do it myself. But I use Capture One as my raw processor. And then I use Photoshop to layer and edit all of like 16-bit TIFFs and a ton of masks. And basically the way I do it is I composite things first, and then I remove like dust spots and reflections, and I clean up the car. And then last I'll do like contrast and color grading.
Okay.
So way you can go back in steps a little bit if you need to undo something or add something back.
Right. Could you clarify a little bit when you say the composite stuff? That was something that I wasn't quite sure on.
So when I composite stuff, what I mean is more like different exposures and different lighting angles. Occasionally, you'll shoot a car and then put it into a totally different background. But for this purpose, when I say compositing, what I really mean is putting together the different pieces of a car to make it look good. Because usually it's not a single frame. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's really cool looking right out of like camera. But
you actually mentioned one thing in particular that which I never actually thought of doing, but it makes a lot of sense, and that is that you shoot with your polarizer at different angles because the car has different. It's curved, and as you move the polarizer, some parts will look better than others, and then when you move the bit, it's vice versa. So I could see how you would bracket polarization positions and then compose those pieces, or rather make composites using the best part of this fender or the roof line or the windows, then create the perfect polarized shot out of several. I've never thought of that, actually.
Yeah, that's a really good way to get rid of reflections and to reduce glare. A lot of times windows and like the top of hoods and roofs can just be super bright and reflecting the sky, and
you
really
get one, you lose something else. And I actually never thought about that. That makes great sense.
Yeah, and the other, a thing that was funny but took me probably too long to figure out was also a sky. When your sky is blue and you are shooting at a fairly wide angle, you turn the polarizer, you get this weird little dark kind of half moon in your sky, and then you turn it a little and then you have it in a different area. So a lot of times I will take the polarizer out for a little while. I use Lee drop-in filters for most of that. So you can just take the polarizer off also, and it's pretty easy and it doesn't really move anything. And it's usually a good idea to shoot way more brackets than you think you need, because if you don't, you're going to look at it later and be like, where's that? I'm missing this.
Yeah, actually, once you go with a lens with an angle of view wider than 90 degrees, which is like a 21 millimeter lens, you'll never get an even sky. That's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, exactly. And that took me a while to figure that out. And I'm glad I eventually, because I was like, why do I keep getting these weird dark like circles in my sky? But yeah, that's something that a lot of new shooters don't know. And that, I guess, just a little free advice out there.
Can you talk a little bit about just dealing with like the natural environment? If you're out on location, I'm thinking, cars are going by, there must be dust kicking up all the time. And how often do you need to kind of put a stop on things and clean lenses, clean gear, or clean the car and whatnot?
Yeah, usually, once you start shooting any particular shot on a tripod, once you're locked in, I don't like to touch anything or clean it unless, something really dirty happens. Typically, you just kind of roll with it and then clean between shots. But that's also because if you go in and you try to clean your lens, it might move your camera even just a little bit at 45 megapixels or higher. A tiny movement is a big amount of work to line it all up later. But as far as other people driving by and like that sort of stuff, you can control only so much of that. Yeah. If you're shooting a commercial project where you have proper permitting and security, that's always a lot easier. But a lot of times if I was shooting a magazine story, like I shoot with Road and Track magazine a lot, and I do a couple like tuner magazines still like every now and then. But those are usually more run and gun. Yeah. And if something happens, like if a bunch of dirt gets on the car, you can say, well, I'm going to go wash the car and come back, or you can just run with it. Yeah. And it's usually more like the natural look is better in the end, and it plays with the story.
How important is it to get like the logos and the the insignia? What do they call them on like the decal, the front
Insignias
on the car?
Yeah.
Is that something that
Yeah,
is
the
often
badges.
the
badges. There you go.
The badges. Yeah. No, the badges are important, and sometimes even we'll go to the point of using a white card or a silk just really close to the badge to make a little plate just for that, where it's super clear, because they're usually chrome or partially chrome.
Right.
And chrome is just, it's literally a mirror. So you have to put a fake reflection of some sort in it to make it like readable. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they like to see their badging because that's a big part of the branding.
Sure, of course.
What about drones? Have you worked drones into your workflow at all?
Yeah, I love drones. Drones are so much fun.
They do things you couldn't do otherwise.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I bought a Phantom 3 because I saw one and a friend of mine let me fly it for like 5 minutes. And I was like, man, this is awesome. It's like a video game, but like cooler. And ever since then, I've been on it. I love drones. I shoot with the Phantom 4 Pro every now and then. But to be honest, with the commercial production, I would bring on a drone operator if we needed to have something bigger.
Yeah.
Because there are guys who spend their whole deal is to become super proficient and fast and efficient. Because, I'm not a pro drone pilot. So I'd rather bring on someone to do that for me. And I would work with them to find the right angles. As opposed to trying to fly and shoot all at the same time. I think that's kind of a lot to handle. But
for a high end shoot, you want somebody where it's just intuitive.
Yeah,
the tool has to be transparent to them. Yep.
Yeah, because it takes them, way less time to get it set up and in the right place than it does for me. So I like drones a lot. I think they're a great technology and they're just a lot of fun.
I kind of wanted to return to just a real quick question, and again, one of these things that it's always different. But on a location job like this, are they always one-day jobs, or will there be you may have to come back another day if you didn't get it right, or do they just budget for the one day and that's it?
It's not usually a single day. Usually, it's multiple days.
Okay.
If the shot list is not very long, you can do it in one day. Mm-hmm. But usually it's 2 days, 3 days. Sometimes it can be up to
how many different setups would you do in 2-3 days?
To be honest, it can be anywhere from 3 or 5 up to like 25 or 30.
Wow, okay.
Depending on if you're going to be lighting each one or if you're just using ambient light.
Right.
Also, depending on whether there's motion or if the car is static. And not to mention if there's talent, like if there's models.
Which is actually getting to my next and maybe last question. I don't know if you have more, Alan, but it was going to be dealing with actors, and because I'm sure there must be some times where you have to have a model. I don't know if you call them actors, but the talent. Do you have to give direction, and does that add a whole other element, or is it kind of easy comparatively?
No, totally. Shooting with talent, like with models, is the fact that there's a car there doesn't really make it any different than if it was just any sort of lifestyle or fashion shoot. You have to be able to interact with your model and get, make them comfortable, have the results that everyone wants come out by, just being able to interact with other humans. Because a car just does what a car does. Right. It's a machine. It's sitting there, whereas a person is a person. So you have to be able to talk with people and direct them, say, like, this is our shot, we want to do this. And a lot of times, car lifestyle, that's like a hot ticket at the moment. People really like realistic photos and with talent to prove like a human connection to the product. Mm-hmm. So,
and are there certain, is that kind of a specialized field for certain actors and models where they turn up in a lot of car ads and car commercials, or not necessarily?
I guess, there are some models who are more doing high fashion and others who are more commercial,
right?
As far as their look goes.
Do you cast, or that is left with the creatives or the agency?
Yeah, usually we'll be involved in that choice a little bit here and there, but a lot of time the casting is a collaboration between the art directors and the creative directors and the photographer as well.
And have you ever photographed, let's say, like a famous driver, or I don't know the circuit so much, but in a case where it was almost a star in the business?
A little, to be honest, not really. But at the racetrack, you can get some candid photos. But I haven't done any shoots with like a household name type of famous person.
Right, cool.
No, but you can now say that you've been on the B&H Photography podcast.
I sure can.
And that counts for a lot. I want you to know that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Besides cars, what other stuff do you do? I mean,
I'm a musician also.
Oh, okay.
I play electric guitar.
Right.
I like Texas blues. So I got a big Stevie Ray Vaughan and Eric Clapton poster on my wall that I'm looking at right now.
All right then. And do you shoot music at all? Or?
I would love to. I just am not in that world. And at this point, I'm focusing on car and car lifestyle. That's my commercial approach. And again, I like to shoot for fun also. Yeah. So that's where I get the fun with the instant film and with the funny lenses and like the weird stuff. Yeah. I feel like it's important to keep photography fun. Yeah. Because otherwise you go insane.
Does your dad look at your work and what does he say? And is he proud of what you're doing?
Yeah. My dad is great. My mom and dad are both still living in Portland and they're retired, but I talk with my dad about photography all the time, and he's a super big gearhead and he loves to see the newest stuff and test out the new lenses and all that. So we geek out pretty hard about all that.
That's great.
That's cool. All right. Well, tell them to subscribe to the podcast to get some geeks here too.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Nate, if you want to add anything we didn't talk about, if there's any there's one question I had to do with maybe a piece of gear that you use that would surprise people. Let
me see. So as far as gear that might be a little unexpected, the rig systems that we use are pretty grandiose. Yeah. There are giant arms that hang off of cars, and those things are pretty cool. There's basically two styles. There's one style that attaches to the top of the car with suction cups and a series of arms. We just use like Manfrotto arms and knuckles and like Avenger suction cups. And then I have some carbon fiber poles that extend off the car up to about 20 feet. And then...
And they remain stable.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
For the most part. there's a little bit of bouncing going on, for sure.
You're shooting with remotes then for that? Or how do you...
So the car doesn't have to move very fast. What you do is you shoot with a long shutter speed of maybe a half second up to about 3 or 4 seconds, depending on how much blur you want in the wheels and on the ground.
Okay.
And you just let the car go slow, and I just walk alongside it with a cable release. But if there's a reason you can't stand next to it, you can do a wireless release also. But again, it depends on where the car is, and also if the camera is like super high or something you can't reach it. You can definitely trigger remotely, and sometimes you even shoot that tethered and just kind of walk your DigiCart alongside.
I don't know why that seems kind of funny.
Like passerbys always stop and see, and they're like, "What on earth are you doing? Like, what is going on here?" It makes no sense until you see the final photo.
And are there is there any tricks that along the lines of what you're talking about, where you're actually moving very slow but making something look like it's going fast, or vice versa, or is that just with rig shots, it's all just a matter of long shutter drag. Yeah.
And if you're doing panning as something like if you're shooting racing, or if you just want to shoot cars that are driving by on Mulholland or something, you can make a slow car look like it's going real fast if you mess with the shutter.
Yeah.
So
totally.
Yeah.
All right, man.
All right. Nate, if people would like to see more of your work, website, Instagram, where should they go to take a peek?
My website is natehasslerphoto.com, and my Instagram is Nate047. and I would love to have you check it out.
Sounds like a good offer. We will do so. It's well worth checking out there.
Great. Awesome.
Okay.
Cool. Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
Anything
Nate.
else?
No, thank you guys. I appreciate it. This has been great.
Okay. If you are not a subscriber to the B&H Photography Podcast, you have no excuses. Come on now. Drop what you're doing and head on over to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher Overcast, or Spotify. And you could always find us on the B&H Explorer website, as well as the B&H Photography Podcast Facebook group page, which is growing like gangbusters. And remember, if the bouncers stop you at the door, just tell them Al sent you. All is good. For now, on behalf of Jason, John, and myself, thank you so much for joining us today.